Welcome back, everyone, to Figuring Out the Formula. I'm your host, Kyle. I'm here with Chandler and Patrick, as always. And boys, what a weekend it was. It was the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and love it, hate it. It happened, kind of. We'll get into a little bit of that in the future. The weekend was just one big party, so let's keep the good vibes going. Raise one up, boys. Cheers. So now that this party has commenced on our side of the pit lane, let's just jump right into practice. So for you guys listening, a lot of times we say, "Oh, nothing really happened here in practice. We'll skip it and move right to the qualifying session." Well, that's not the case this week. In fact, this was probably the craziest practice session of the year. Normally, practices consisted of 3 FP1 sessions. They're about an hour apiece, spread out throughout, Friday and Saturday. Well, FP1, first time we're seeing cars on track here in Vegas. Brand new course, street course. You don't know what's going to happen. It's cold. We'll get into that, but there's a lot of unknowns, right? Well, as FP1 started, 8 minutes into it, Pat, there was something that went seriously wrong.
So this was definitely one of the stranger things I've seen in F1. It's not unheard of. It has happened before, also on another street circuit. But as Carlos Sainz is, just driving along the straight, cruising, everything's great, looking at the pretty hotels. The force of the cars was so great that it pulled a drain cover out of the circuit, like straight out of the ground, and it punched a hole through the bottom of his car, which I think a couple drivers behind him had to swerve to avoid debris. And there's plenty of videos where you just see Carlos Sainz's car just showering sparks everywhere. I mean, I honestly, watching it, I thought it was almost like a Roman Grosjean moment where his car just exploded. And I was like, holy shit, did this guy just fucking die? And honestly, thank God nothing more serious happened.
Yeah.
But I think he said even his seat was damaged.
As I know that there were some reports that said he could look down, because obviously they sit kind of laid, almost like they're laying down in the car. He could look down in between his feet and he could see the Las Vegas Strip underneath his feet. Pretty damn scary, if you ask me. I'd be hitting them brakes pretty damn hard too.
Well, I mean, you look down and see the Strip. It's just got prostitutes on one side and crackheads on the other. It's like, ooh, that's gross. But anyways, the thing is, no one knew what the fuck happened. We're 8 minutes into this brand new circuit. The hype behind this was, it was supposed to be the craziest sporting event in the world of 2023. Well, 8 minutes into it, Ocon runs over the manhole plate, brings it up a little bit, and then fucking Carlos Sainz. The Ferrari luck this year is crazy, right? Like these guys were saying, the hole in his floor, it ruined not only his floor, it ruined the chassis, it ruined power units, it ruined suspension and front wings. His whole car was basically fucked. The thing is, right, he needs to race. This was the first session of the entire weekend, so they have to fix the car. Well, Chandler, there's a penalty after a certain amount. Pat has talked about it in the past regarding power units, that kind of thing. Explain a little bit about the penalty that Carlos Sainz got after this situation.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I don't know exactly which part causes penalty because it screwed up so much of the power unit. It was not just one individual piece, but amongst all the power units components, you get a lot of a certain amount a year. This was the second to last race of the year, so most of the drivers, if not all the 20 drivers, have used up all their allotment. And if you have to use more, you can. It's not like you can't race anymore, but you just have to take a penalty. The penalty for this is pretty steep to kind of, they don't want you to just get a new one every single race when it comes down the championship race. If it was still, up for grabs. So it's a 10-place grid penalty for replacing one of these components. Now, here's the facts is that he had to replace one. The FIA said, oh, you replace that part. That's over your allotment. Here's a 10-place grid penalty. My opinion on the matter is that is bullshit because the FIA, come to find out on top of this, didn't even have time to inspect the track before they started first practice because it is the Las Vegas Strip. It is a public circuit. They had it open to drive on up until 3 hours before practice, which that is standard at street circuits. Monaco might be the exception, but Monaco shuts the whole place down for that. But Baku, Azerbaijan, they're the same way. So this is nothing new, but the FIA didn't do an inspection on a first-time track. Maybe say, hey, this one time we're going to shut the track down a day before that we can.
The simple inspection that Chandler's talking about is any manhole cover, any drainage cover, a valve, anything like that needs to be welded down because the air that comes from the bottom of these cars, the suction effect, I mean, it's insane. So they have to be welded down as well as the frames around them have to be welded down. Mm-hmm. So, Pat, the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz got a 10-place grid penalty. Something we've seen very rarely in the sport is, keep in mind, there's 10 teams, 2 cars per team, 20 cars. Ferrari is one team, so that leaves 9 other teams. 8 of those 9 teams put a request into the FIA, the governing body of Formula One, and said, please waive this penalty. Carlos Sainz did nothing wrong. Ferrari did nothing wrong. It's a $2 million accident that Ferrari's footing the bill for because the track's not paying for their car and stuff like that. They suffered enough. Their engineers have to fix this shit. So basically, we see a waiver request put in signed by 8 of the 9 teams. I say 8 of the 9 because there was one missing, which means it was denied because you have to have uniform commitment to the waiver. Who was the last remaining team and why did this team not sign this waiver?
So the only team that decided to not give Carlos Sainz a pass in this instance was Mercedes because currently, throughout this last half of the season, Ferrari's been really improving and they are slowly catching Mercedes in the points, which from a competitive standpoint, I get it. You want all the advantages above your rivals and, whatever, but that's just the most dickhead move like you could possibly come up with. And in reality, like this should not even be in the hands of the other teams. Like this should be up to the fucking FIA themselves. Like
the stewards. There's 2 stewards.
Yeah, I don't know why you would require all the other teams to like an instance like this. Like that's the worst fucking option possible. I mean, and it just really. I've been trying to just tolerate Mercedes as a team, but it's just like every now and then there's just like that kid in Austin last year and the people in Canada. And now this, I'm just like, just fuck those guys, bro. Like, that's just pitiful.
Yeah. So as a competitor, I definitely get it. They're fighting Ferrari. Mercedes is fighting Ferrari for second place. I get that. But when 8 of the 9 other teams are like, yeah, this is fucked. You did nothing wrong. Your team did nothing wrong. Okay. Now, if Carlos Sainz saw a manhole already, like, the cover is already in the middle of the road and he didn't swerve if he had time, that's a different story, right? But he had no chance of reacting. So I think, at this point, the rules need to be changed. Most of the drivers were saying, okay, this is fucked. We need to change these rules because, it was absurd. And we'll see later on in the race, like, karma's a bitch. So remember Mercedes, remember the fact that they made Carlos Sainz take a 10-place grid penalty. That was FP1. So 8 minutes into FP1, track was damaged. They canceled the rest of the session. I mean, buddy.
Mind you, this is at what time on Friday morning? Technically Friday.
This was 11:30 at night. Eastern time.
11:30
So-
Eastern. Okay, so we're getting close to like 10 o'clock Thursday night going into Friday for Vegas time. So we're already pretty late in the night, for a Formula One race.
Yeah. The thing is, right, like this was FP1. People paid thousands and thousands of dollars. Some people could only afford like a single day pass, right? So you get to FP1 and there's only 8 minutes of actual racing for the Thursday. Like I'd be pissed. Well, luckily FP2 is on the same day as FP1. Well, it's a different day, but it's the same time frame, right? Because so it was the FP1 was at 11:30, like I said, and then FP2 is at 3:30. I want to say it was around 3:30.
Like that, yeah.
So you're staying up all night long. Your one ticket gets you into both practice sessions. Well, Pat, that is not the case. That did not happen. So moving into FP2, you had fans that stayed. Keep in mind, they only saw 8 minutes of practice. They stayed in the track. They stayed at their seats. They spent money in the grandstands, buying beer, buying food, souvenirs. FP2 rolls around, Pat. And what do they do to these fans who invested a lot of money into coming to this session?
So they basically just start kicking everybody out. And also like this isn't even just like the security. Like this is like the actual like Vegas police being sent to kick everyone out, which is fucking crazy. And, people are just kind of casually sitting there like, we're really getting kicked out. And the cops are like getting snappy with them. Like, yes, which
don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you, baby.
I want to say something came out about like they were basically adhering to some kind of like union agreement or some shit like that. Which
what was Tony Soprano in charge of this fucking Grand Prix?
I don't get it, but it's ridiculous. What's even worse is that they later, like the organizers later came out and said, oh, if you had a single day ticket, you would get a $200 credit to the F1 store. That's
where I get really mad.
$200 in the F1 store. That's fucking nothing. That's like a fucking hat and like I don't know.
That's the free booklet that they give.
All right. Yeah. So I did see a picture, and I wish I had saved this picture. Someone took a picture of the merchandise stand, and you could get an Aston Martin shirt, or you could get a Red Bull hat plus a Williams beanie, but that's the only two combinations that you can get an item with, because other than that, everything else was over $200 or already sold out.
Yeah, it's just asinine. Like already at the track, like for those of you that go to F1 races or think about going to an F1 race, if you want merch, buy that shit way before the race. At the racetrack, the prices are insane. Buy it anywhere you can except for actually at the track. Now,
AliExpress, baby.
The second part that's also dumb about this is that they only said for the single day pass holders. So if you bought, if you spent $4,000 on a 3-day ticket to some crazy good seat, sorry, pal, like take a hike. You get nothing.
You went from $1,600 a day to $2,000 a day now, baby.
Exactly.
The thing is, this infuriated fans from all over the world, not just fans at the track. There was actually, and to see it move this quickly is crazy. Anyone who knows the American justice system knows shit don't work quick. Well, there was a class action lawsuit filed against it wasn't Liberty Media, but I want to say it was fired against the event company that plan. So basically the track, right? Like the event organizers of the track.
The LLC that like is a bunch of Vegas moguls that own the property, and like the Clark County government, all that combined. LLC. Yeah.
So they filed the class action lawsuit against them, alleging that they didn't provide the services that were in the contracts of the tickets, right? Like you buy a ticket for 2 practice sessions and you only see 8 minutes of one and you get kicked out of the other. I mean, I'm sure there's some like fine print somewhere that says they reserve the right to do that or whatever, but that's fucked. That is very fucked. So 2 practice sessions into the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and the internet is just ripping it a new asshole. I mean, the whole track, everybody in F1 is just getting flamed for what a shit show this is. Moving into FP3, that shit show continues. Unfortunately, it was only for a Williams driver, Alex Albon, who has been amazing all year round, who competed in the the Netflix Cup, shitty trophy, but shitty production also. But it was fun to watch a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Alex Albon, unfortunately, just like his golf swing where he fell down, he fell right into the wall. He kind of clipped it. It looks like something from Monaco, actually, where, you hit the wall, just, you go a little too wide, your wheel hits the wall, and then your suspension's broken, that kind of thing. Over. Unfortunately, that led to a red flag. So FP1 ended after the drainage cover issue, 8 minutes in. FP2, no live audience. FP3, Albon's red flag caused this session to end early. So there has not been one full practice session the entire Grand Prix.
On a brand new track that everybody's seeing for the first time.
Yep. So that's great. What the fuck do we do? Okay. Well, let's just jump ahead. At 3:30 Eastern time in the morning, let's just qualify. I'm not going to lie. I recorded that shit, watched it as soon as I woke up the next morning, didn't touch my phone. I'm not staying up till 3:30 to watch qualifying. And I'm glad I didn't, because out in Q1, McLaren, not McLaren driver, not Lando Norris, not Oscar Piastri, McLaren. Both cars were out. This shirt, not lucky. Brand new shirt. Shout out. Appreciate it. It was not lucky at all. So it really was. It was just a nightmare. Moving it like Q1, like out in Q1, like I said, you had McLaren. So you had Yuki Tsunoda, Oscar Piastri, Zhou, then you had Ocon, and then Lando Norris. So this looked like a McLaren team we're not familiar with. This looked like the beginning of the season McLaren team.
That's what I was about to say. It looked like the Bahrain Q1.
Yeah. Well, with 19 and 20, P19, P20 is like, but they said from the get-go, like, okay, this is not our track. This does not suit our car. So they were expecting lesser results, but I don't think not having any cars in Q2 was part of that. Pat, moving into Q2, though, we had Daniel Ricciardo out. Then you had Stroll out, Hülkenberg, Perez, and Hamilton. So you would think that Perez being out in Q2 is a shocker, but it's not, because that seems to be where he's been living. But Hamilton, on the other hand, that is kind of a bit of a shock.
So this was actually kind of interesting. So going back to Checo, actually, he kind of got fucked by Red Bull in Q2. He thought he had a great time, and I think they pulled him into the pits with 2.5, 3 minutes to go left in the qualifying session. And at this point, the track is continuously improving. Like, people are constantly upping the lap times, and they just didn't send him back out for some reason. And he was in fourth with his lap, but I'm just watching it, and it's just like up, and Checo's down one, down another, down another, down another, until he ended up in 12th.
Didn't they bring him in with like 2 minutes left, like 2.5?
Yeah,
something?
like it was like plenty of time to if you wanted to swap out tires or something, or put more fuel in the car and send him back out. But they just held him because I guess they thought he had a good enough lap time, which obviously ended up being a terrible choice. And then you had Mercedes, who honestly, fuck them. Lewis Hamilton out in Q2 for the first time in a while. And they just, I didn't really see anything like promising from them in qualifying.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was a little bit surprising, just because they at least make Q3, whether they, get up to fourth or third, that's a different story, but they make it into Q3. Moving into Q3, though, you had no accidents. So you had a practice session full of events and accidents. Then qualifying, you had nothing of the sort. So on pole was Charles Leclerc, then Carlos Sainz, and then Max Verstappen. Unfortunately, we talked about Carlos's incident with the drain cover, and he got the 10th place grid penalty due to Mercedes not being a good sport. They did not sign the waiver, which caused him to keep his penalty. So instead of getting second place, he was moved down to 12th. So to start on pole for the actual race, you had Charles Leclerc, then you had Max Verstappen and George Russell. Chandler, whenever Charles Leclerc starts on pole, you would think that he would win the race. Unfortunately, whenever Charles Leclerc starts on pole, who wins the race?
That would be Mr. Max Verstappen. Some are saying that Mr. Leclerc himself is actually a double agent for Christian Horner and Red Bull because he'll go out and bang home a pole lap only to just give it right back to Max. So going into this race, you can kind of assume that every one of us three were like, well, Max win incoming, baby. So it's a tale as old as time. And honestly, it kind of gets a little bit more entertaining each time. Like I will never forget, like just the one that sticks out to me was last year, Hungary. Leclerc started on pole. Max takes the lead, resounding pretty much right off the bat, does a full pirouette spin out in the middle of the race, and then still proceeds to win. We find new ways for Charles to try and hand the win back to Max every time he gets pole.
I mean, at least Charles, he made it through the session.
That's right.
Wins in a Ferrari, but moving into the race section of the race weekend, there was a lot of topics of discussion. One was the time of the race. So the later it is in the evening or early in the morning, depending on which way you're looking at it, the colder it got, right? Before we get into the actual commentary behind the weather, let's pull right into Pat's paddock, grab our jackets, our Baileys and coffee, warm up a little bit. Pat, tell us a little bit about the weather.
So welcome back to Pat's Paddock, everybody. So we're going to talk about weather and temperature and things like that today. Now, for those of you that have never really been to Vegas, it is in the desert, but even in the winter, Vegas does get cold. I think that the ambient temperature was around 50-ish degrees pretty much the whole weekend through the night. Now, why this is important is because of how it affects the cars. So with the tires on the cars, tires actually need to be heated to an optimal temperature. So currently what happens is teams will keep them inside tire blankets until, whenever they're ready to be put on the car. They'll usually keep those at about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So, they're nice, warm, go ahead right on the car. Doesn't take anything on the track to warm them up. Now, they still do need a little bit of warmth so that the cars can get the tires to, I think it's around like 215 degrees Fahrenheit, which pretty hot, but like cars go fast and they do need that heat to get the proper grip in the tire. So the issues come when you have, safety cars in cold temperatures like this, and safety cars going, less than half of the speed of an F1 car. And so drivers can't get the temperature in their tires, and they're way more likely to slip or spin or things like that. On the flip side, which we saw a little bit earlier in the season in Qatar, is when they're too hot, they're just going to degrade way too quickly. And so the teams have to keep coming in the pits to swap them out so they don't, suffer a blowout or something like that. The other kind of key component is the brakes. Now, when teams know it's going to be maybe a little bit of a colder environment, like say here, maybe Canada or somewhere early in the season, they'll actually shorten the brake ducts so that, it's not taking in as much cold air, and then the brakes can also stay in their ambient temperature. Because what happens with that is if the brakes get, too hot, they can lock up. And then when you have sectors such as the long straight that ends in, I think it's turns 14 and 15 in Vegas, The drivers are changing the brake bias. So they're putting more force in the brakes on the front, which if they're not in the right windows, they can misalign with the rears, and then, you'll either lock up or spin out, which, we'll talk about in the race section, happened a lot this weekend. So tire temperature and brake temperature are both, very crucial things teams keep monitoring. There were some pushes by the FIA to ban tire blankets to kind of, I guess, level the playing field with just cold start tires, which currently is a bad idea. So they've pushed it back until I think 2025. But
they went full put it in reverse, Terry.
Yeah, it's a very, very big variable, with temperature and, the car tires and the brakes, kind of all being in sync in the right temperature windows. And if they're not, you'll see chaos on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. So like with the weather, like Pat talks a lot about the tire temperature and the brake temperature, stuff like that. For those of you who are just getting into F1, but maybe you watched other types of racing, NASCAR does tape. So over the brake ducts, they can put tape. So it looks like duct tape. You put duct tape over it and it covers a portion of the actual duct intake. What happens from that is obviously less air is getting into the ducts, which raises the temperature of the brakes, brake pads, brake calipers, all that, the rotors. So it's a similar thing, but they can either shorten in F1, they can either shorten or they can restrict those ducts up to a certain point. Because if you just close them off, then your brakes are going to get hot, no matter how cold it is outside. So you do want to have airflow, just minimal airflow. I think the big conversation was, why was this not talked about, right? Like everyone knows the fucking weather in November in the desert is in the middle of the night, it's fucking freezing. So why are we doing this in November in the middle of the night? Night race is great, but we couldn't switch it with another race. I mean, maybe not. I don't know the logistics behind it, but
I mean, my thoughts were, I guess it's probably to do something with, one, the prep time they needed for it being the first iterants, and they decided this like last year, and two, maybe something with like the NFL. But I feel like, it could maybe be moved up towards like when they go to COTA or something like that, so it's not such a big travel gap for teams.
My thought before this is that, in all honesty, obviously they're looking out for their carbon footprint from like an ecological standpoint. Do it the week after Canada. That way you got June 20th, and then you'd almost be like, have to do it at midnight because it would be 150 degrees during the day.
You want a show in Vegas, Chan. You do it in the summer months in Vegas.
Yeah, summer in Vegas would still be brutal. Like
Wayne Newton takes a back seat to F1 in Vegas in the summertime.
Yes, I'm just talking. I'm not even talking about the race in here. I'm talking just straight up show, because Max Verstappen even said this weekend that the Las Vegas Grand Prix is 99% show, 1% racing. Well, you want a show? You put that bitch in the middle of, June, July, the summer months. Oh, buddy, the star power that's coming from that, the parties, the money you're making. I mean, it's crazy. Now, whether the strip and all the hotels, the casinos can handle losing revenue, if you will, because, they made their money, but losing revenue, if they can handle it, that's a different story. I mean, there's a lot more logistical behind it than we know of, but just thinking out loud here, the weather caused a lot of issues. I mean, Chandler, whether it was off track, on track, like manhole covers flying off, because who knows, maybe it was too cold, the welds didn't hold. We don't know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, this is the first year, and I don't remember. I think this slots in the same spot next year, but F1 has already committed to this. We've signed a 10-year deal with this place. So moving forward, looking at 2025, why not? I mean, if your argument of this right here after Brazil, but before, like kind of your like Mexico City, Brazil, if your argument is, we want to stay on the Western Hemisphere for, climate purposes, then You can stay on the Western Hemisphere after Canada or before Canada. I mean, either one, you're fine.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. We talk a little bit about the weather because I believe it played a huge part in what happened during the race. So there were a couple instances where the tires were so cold, whether that be at the start of the race, during restarts, whatever it might be, where drivers could not get grip. So starting out the race, you had Max Verstappen. Keep in mind, Charles Leclerc was on pole, Max Verstappen was in second. Max Verstappen has an incredible start. I mean, he's side by side next to Chuck. And what happens is he runs out of room. Max is on the inside, runs out of room, and pushes Charles right off, off the, track. They breached track limits because Max pushed Chuck off. Well, a lot of people thought like, oh, Max just braked way too late and all this stuff. And basically Charles didn't have a chance, which, Pat, those people are right. But the thing is, in my opinion, there wasn't enough time to warm up the tires. And Max made a move that he makes almost every race, multiple times a race. But because the tires were so cold, he wasn't able to do anything with it. Do you think that, I mean, I know you're a Red Bull fan and you might side a little bit with that. Do you think that that was the case, or do you think Max just was like, fuck this, I'm getting the lead regardless, and we'll go from there?
So I don't think Max really had bad intentions, so to speak. I think it's, part of the problem with just cold tires and everything like that. After if you're at the front of the grid, when you pull up to the start line, you're still waiting on all the people way behind you to take their time to get into place. So everything is cooling off pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do think he deserved a penalty for it personally. I don't think it's all under his control because, like we said, it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
But, just because you can't handle your car, that doesn't quite give you a pass, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. But Max wasn't the only one. Chandler, you had Fernando Alonso, who also had a hell of a start. I mean, he was zigging and zagging, and I think he passed like 5 people on the initial start. He gets into turn 1. He's on the inside, just like Max was, and he ran out of room. He didn't have any grip, just like Max didn't. But the difference is Max was in the front, where when he missed it, Charles Leclerc was the only one that suffered. Fernando, when he missed the turn, he spun Carlos Sainz, and Valtteri Bottas got damaged, and Checo Perez got damaged from it. It was a bottleneck shit show.
Yes.
All because Fernando Alonso didn't realize how much grip he truly had.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a personification of me at the craps table, where just on a heater to start off and then just falls all apart, and like just no control when you get on a heater like that, because he took over 3 or 4 overtakes at least, and then just reckless abandon, all in, double it up. Let's go. I'm on a heater. I can't lose. And there's a 7, aka torpedoes everybody, damage everywhere.
We talk about Carlos Sainz having a hole in his floor and seeing the Las Vegas Strip. Chandler, give us the picture of you after you double or nothing and lost all your money at Vegas. Give us the picture that Fernando Alonso sees when you're laying on the ground underneath his tire.
You just looking there, you're like, well, you can do exactly what I did in Montreal. You can go, well, based off the conversion rate, that's not as bad as I thought it was. I guess back load up again. I'm telling you, that's I actually sent a text message this morning to Jeff. It was the Jeff Pope. Shout out if you're listening. It's the picture of the 2 miners, like Miners. Yeah. One of them has the pickaxe over his shoulder, walking backwards, and he's this far from hitting the diamonds, and you got another guy who's still at it and is going to hit it. But sometimes your best days of gambling and your best days of Formula One are just after your lowest moments.
You doubled down on all this with our predictions for this race. We'll get into that a little bit later to see if your bet actually hit. The thing is, from Max getting Charles Leclerc off track and then Alonso getting a slew of drivers off track, you had a virtual safety car. From that virtual safety car with the restart, obviously it's not like a real restart. It just goes green again. Lando Norris, lap 3. Like I said, brand new shirt. Maybe it's lucky. He had a shitty qualifying effort, but who knows? Maybe. So you're telling me there's a chance. Dumb and Dumber, if anyone got that reference. There was no chance. Lando Norris, lap 3, he bottomed the car out on a bump, which I don't even know. Lando Norris bottomed the car out and lost all grip and had a huge accident. I mean, he was shaking in his car. The accident was so violent, so bad. Luckily, he was released from the hospital and all this stuff, and he's fine. But obviously, he did not finish the race. But it's a fucking brand new track. It cost the taxpayers of Las Vegas hundreds of millions of dollars. They couldn't make it fucking flat. There were potholes in that bitch. This ain't the Atlanta Grand Prix. Why the fuck are there potholes? What the fuck are we doing?
Weird. They would show like, I guess, rear facing views of like the straights, and there were actually somewhat small hills and divots in the track. And I was honestly kind of halfway expecting like a car to actually like catch just a little bit of air and go
there
flying.
Goes them Duke boys again.
Like it was actually kind of scary. I was like, damn, like, you know, we could get somebody flying off into the damn Bellagio or something. Yeah, that Lando accident was vicious, and it was on a straight. It wasn't even like he had turned yet or anything. He's getting ready to turn. And then all of a sudden his car just goes fucking flying into the wall and down into the runoff. And it was actually pretty vicious crash, but you know, thankfully he's okay. But that was just, I mean, I'd love for someone to do like an actual technical analysis of exactly what happened and why his car just suddenly spinned when he was not doing anything.
You know what my theory is behind the whole situation? We talk about the bumps on the track and stuff like that. For those of you listening, go back and check out the episode where we talked about stories from Austin. We mentioned the crew that repaved the COTA, Circuit of the Americas track. Great group of guys, but they got shat on that weekend because the drivers hated the track. I am willing to bet all of Chandler's life savings that the guys from Texas took a Uber, a bus, a plane, a train, an automobile, all the way to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and they squirmed their way onto the job site. And boy, they're like, oh yeah, I put the rebar in over there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I welded the manhole cover down. I swear to God, I did. I'm willing to bet that those guys were like, yeah, you want to talk shit? Okay. We're going to make sure your car costs $2 million extra this weekend. So maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but if those people are listening, please give me a shout out because I know what you did. I know what you did. So we mentioned earlier about Max Verstappen getting into Charles Leclerc. Well, after Lando Norris had his revenge from the repavement guys, I don't know, whatever, we're just going to settle on that. After that happened, Max Verstappen on his radio was told by his engineer that he had a 5-second penalty for causing a collision. Pat, what was Max's response to this?
He said, GP comes over the radio and he says, well, you got a 5-second penalty, but you're already 2 seconds ahead, so just keep going. And Max just goes, that's fine. Send them my regards. And basically just proceeds to put his foot down. And he's like, all right, well, we've discussed it before. You know, it's usually a 5-second penalties and it's just nothing.
Yeah.
And Max was basically just like, all right, fuck you. You know, I'll just drive faster.
for normal drivers, a 5-second time penalty is a fucking joke. For Max Verstappen, who's won 100 races in a row, it seems like, it's 2 seconds. Great. Now I'll only be 45 seconds ahead of the second place driver. It's such a joke. They need to change that rule as well as the other rules we talked about earlier.
Someone did suggested after this, so this is where we need to bring back the IndyCar drive-through penalty, where you have to just drive through the pit. That would be exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure. They need to do something, but clearly it didn't matter because Max Verstappen, after that 5-second time penalty was announced, he was battling George Russell after, pit cycle and all this stuff. He's battling George Russell on lap 25, and it went on for a couple laps. Chandler, Max was like, I don't know. Max was driving like a pissed off teenager. I mean, when you're in the middle of road rage on I-75 and you just have someone driving in the left lane, riding slow as fuck, and you try to pass them, but they speed up and they ride right next to someone, I feel like that's the same level of aggression that Max Verstappen had, because he just fucking clipped George Russell. He's like, all right, if you're not going to get the fuck out of my way, then I'm going to move you out of the way.
Yeah, and he did. He definitely did. It was like, I think it was probably gave him about a half a lap to try, and says, well, you know what? I'm tired of this, and just proceeded to plow right in front of him.
Max, I don't agree with that.
What are you talking about?
I don't agree with y'all's take, bro.
What?
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying factually what happened. He was trying to pass him and then just decided I'm taking the inside.
Look,
okay. What are you saying then, Pat? What is your impression of this?
Okay, so literally like 2 laps before this, Max did the exact same thing to Joe and flew past him going from turn 10 through turn 12.
Yeah, Joe's also a pussy, though.
Whoa. Okay, we're not going to slander Joe here. This is not about Joe. Joe's
okay.
He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy.
All right.
But the thing is,
all right. Hold on. Let me apologize. I'm sorry.
This was also confirmed by George after the race that Max sent it into a gap. It was a tight gap. It was a tight gap. It wasn't, super clean. No, yes or no. But George literally just didn't fucking see it. Like, he didn't expect it and just didn't check his rearview mirrors at all, and then didn't even realize Max was there and just turned in.
Well, George only has side view mirrors, not rear view. But
I mean, they show when a motherfucker behind you goes to pull out on your left, you'll fucking know it. And Georgie just didn't notice, because Georgie sucks, dude. Fuck that guy. He didn't notice it, and he paid the price.
Okay, well, I'm not disagreeing that I fucking hate George Russell and I wish he could get in every accident, but Max was 100% at fault. I mean, he started off the race pushing Charles Leclerc off. Then he gets a 5-second time penalty, and he basically tells the FIA to suck,
keep
suck the soul out of that thing. And then he hits George Russell because George Russell is actually fighting back against him, unlike Joe was.
Okay.
You move throughout the race. That was on lap 25. What happened from that, though, after Max destroyed George Russell's wing, you had debris all over the track, which caused a safety car. Boom. That should be another penalty. Unfortunately, the FIA is not consistent.
It was for George. It was a penalty for George.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the FIA is not consistent. So Max got a penalty earlier in the race for going on the inside, running wide, and hitting Charles Leclerc. Okay, gets a penalty. Then later in the race, Max is on the inside. He runs wide and hits George Russell. George Russell gets a penalty. What the fuck?
I'm not gonna keep going on with this, but like you're generalizing the two situations too much.
I am not. I think whatever. We're gonna agree to disagree because the FIA is so inconsistent in this scenario. Chandler,
we can all agree that the FIA
blame the refs.
Yeah, I will. Bro, I'm a Steeler. Bro, I'm a Steeler.
Like you don't hate the FIA's consistency, lack thereof either.
Bro, I'm a Steelers fan. Of course, I'm going to blame the refs. Okay, that's what we do. But like Chandler said, we can all agree that the refs, the FIA in this scenario, suck ass. So whether you want to blame George Russell, you want to blame fucking Joe, you want to blame Valerie Bottas or Michael Massey still, I don't give a shit. Either way, the FIA is also to blame.
I blame Jensen Button just because I can.
Actually, take that back. I blame Danica Patrick. She probably actually did it. Moving from Max hitting or not hitting George Russell, Checo Perez, he qualified like shit, but he is the king of the streets. He gets all the way up to the top 3 due to all these safety cars and VSCs, and he is fighting for second place. No, third.
He's fighting for second. Yeah,
second. Yeah, he is fighting for second place. So he is fighting against Charles Leclerc, who is not going to win because he started on pole. So you just naturally know he's not going to win the race, as we said earlier. So lap 44, Checo passes Charles Leclerc because Charles ran wide on a turn. So Charles made a mistake and Checo was right there to pounce. That's great. Great battle. You know, that was awesome driving because he was just sitting right behind him for laps and laps and laps. And then when Charles finally made a mistake, he capitalized on it. Great racing. We haven't seen a whole lot of confidence from Checo, you know, in the second half of the season. I'm glad to see that he's back to his original form. Unfortunately, that did not last. So on the last lap, you had Charles Leclerc pass Checo. Checo made a mistake, just like Charles had done previously, and paid the price. Charles Leclerc passed Checo on the last lap to gain second place. So before all this battling happened, you had Nico Hülkenberg and Yuki Tsunoda retire from the race on lap 47 out of 50. Overall, I think it was great racing. I mean, it wasn't as good as the Fernando Alonso Checo battle, you know, that came down to the last lap because Charles wasn't supposed to get second place in this race. Like after Checo made that pass, Chandler, in my opinion, I mean, the race was over.
It should have been game set match.
Yeah, all Checo had to do was just run a clean race to the end.
And I'll also give Max some props because where we were a year ago in maybe not exactly to the week, but a year ago in Brazil when they let Max pass and then, hey, Max, give the position back to Checo. No, I had my reasons, all that stuff, is that you did have that conversation with the last lap and a half, maybe last 2 laps of Max saying, okay, I'll back up to try and tow him along, get a double tow. Mm-hmm. So I will say that I will give some props to Max on that. That's something that should go noted is that Max did try and help out. I don't know if it was just too far back where he would have to back up too much. But I will say at least he was just like, he can fend for himself and go.
So, Pat, the things that I was seeing online was based off the scientific evidence with the amount of time between Checo and Max. Max did back up. Obviously, you could see that in the time. If he backed off any more, then Charles Leclerc, because the straights are so long in Vegas, could have, like, if they were in DRS range, like if Checo in second place was in DRS range of Max, then Charles Leclerc could have had a double overtake.
Yep.
In one corner. So Max had to give him a tow, but not give him DRS, because if he gave him DRS, he gave Charles Leclerc DRS, who could have a double overtake to win the race. So Red Bull was not prepared to give first place away, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty tough situation for Red Bull to try to get both of them in that window, of which, honestly, it was really good driving from Charles Leclerc. Yeah. He was in first for a good portion of the race, and had some very solid battery deployment and harvesting just all the way around the track. I mean, there were probably 10 or so laps where the Red Bulls both had DRS and couldn't catch him still. Mm-hmm. And then I think eventually, Charles just deployed too much battery and, Max passed him, but he at least hadn't let Checo by yet. And then, once Checo got by, you started to see the interval just go up and up. And I think it got to like 1.7 seconds at one point. So, it's, there's no hope for Leclerc. And then I think he honestly was just doing a very good job at harvesting his battery and just saved it for one last charge in the last, last lap, and just full sent it. And it ended up working out for him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, well, Checo did not defend as well as he could have. But at that point in the race, your tires are shot, your car is shot, your batteries are done for. Yeah, you're on a hope and a prayer.
Back and forth, so you make your one move, and then the rest of the straight, you're toast. I mean,
yeah,
you kind of just stand pat and make them make a move around you type.
100%. To finish out the race, though, so this was the first Grand Prix in Vegas in decades and decades and decades. First one of this track. You had Max Verstappen, who came home with the win. Surprise, surprise, no shock there. In second place, like we said, Charles Leclerc made that last lap pass on Checo. So the driver of the day, though, was Charles Leclerc, which I think the last 5 weeks or something, it's been Lando Norris. But as we said earlier, Lando crashed out. So that's great. Race is over. We normally jump into the cool down room. That's awesome. I turn my volume all the way up on my TV so I can hear what the fuck they're saying. The FIA announced something peculiar this week. Chandler, what happened with the cool down room?
So the cool down, it was announced by the FIA that there would not be a cool down room, as that there would be the drivers would be driven by car to the Bellagio for the podium. So now that, again, kind of going back, that's what happened. The rumors and speculation about it, I think, Kyle, you mentioned it earlier, that Max earlier in the week had said this is a 99% show, 1% race. Max had some pretty disparaging comments about this circuit, this setup, and all that, which is not what you want from your poster child of F1, of the sport.
A 3-time champion.
Yeah. So, and then especially after, because this came out after the practice one had been canceled and stuff. So it was really a lot of people were assuming that Vegas or F1, Liberty Sports Media, whomever, was kind of like, we're not letting them have a hot mic. Mm-hmm. I will say what is very good about it, instead of having a cool down room to take them to the Bellagio, the car that they were driven in, all three of them sat in the back seat of the car together, which, first off, F1 drivers are small as it is to be able to fit in the car. But when Max has to sit up on the edge of the seat, they could have gotten a bigger car. Let's be honest. Let's not act like we couldn't have gotten a bigger car. But anyhow, they took them in the car to the Bellagio. They were mic'd up in the car. So there was a hot mic in the car. So we did get kind of a mobile cool down room, if you will, which was kind of funny because I didn't even notice it till after the race when they got out that the Red Bull team was wearing essentially Elvis fire suits. Mm-hmm. But I mean, nothing really. They talk about the race for 5 seconds, I think, because it was where are we going? Why are we in this car?
Yeah.
I think Charles Leclerc says Charles just goes, "Oh, are we going straight to the nightclub?" Club. And Max was like, "Yeah, to the nightclub we go." So it was good. It's different. Again, the problem with it being good and different is that it just reinforces what Max said. This is 99% about show, and it's not about the actual race. So.
To touch a little bit on that, I think that the racing after lap 25 was amazing. So after lap 25, there were no more safety cars, anything like that. It was just straight racing for half the race. No crashes, nothing like that. Just pure, unadulterated racing. The tires were warm, so they were making amazing passes. Shout out to Oscar Piastri, who that dude looked like a bat out of hell on some of the passes that he was doing on track. I think that the race after lap 25, in my opinion, was probably the best race of the year. Beforehand, in the practice sessions, it was a fucking shit show. It was a shame. It was bad. It was just bad. The qualifying efforts, the time frame. You can't have a United States Grand Prix start at 3:30 in the morning for qualifying. That's not right. Because even though it's 3:30 for us, like around the world, it's just not a good time, right? The race before lap 25, I thought was bigger. It was a bigger shit show than the practice sessions were. I think it was disgraceful to see the lack of grip out there. Formula One cars are known for their grip, the engineering marvels to be able to put that much speed down, make those turns at that high G forces. Overall, though, I think I give the Las Vegas Grand Prix a B minus. So that's my grade, is a B minus. Pat, if you had to give a letter grade to the Las Vegas Grand Prix as a whole, like I just did, what is your letter grade?
I think I'd also give it a B minus. That's a pretty fair assessment. The racing was objectively good. You had some chaos, which at the beginning, which in theory there shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a bit of a lull in the race for probably 15 laps, and nothing really happened. And then after lap 20, 25, people started cutting up the field. There was tons of overtaking. I mean, like I said earlier, that overtake that Max did on Joe was pretty fucking sweet to watch. And I think the race itself was actually good, and hopefully there's all this showmanship and stuff was over the top because it's the first time they're doing it in Vegas.
Yeah,
and they dial it back a bit next year. Vegas is Las Vegas. I didn't like all the stuff I saw on social media beforehand, because people don't understand how F1 races work and stuff like that. So I'm not going to go into that. But there's definitely a lot to improve on. But it wasn't a complete failure like everyone expected.
Everyone, before we jump into Chandler's letter grade, I think that everyone on social media had so much to say about the locals not being happy, right? Well, the locals aren't happy at every track, right? Like you could go to Austin and you'd have people pissed off that there's a shit ton of people there in the middle of college football season, right? You could go to any other track and someone's pissed off that you're there. But the majority of people are proud that the sport chose their city. They're proud that all these people from different backgrounds are experiencing the sport that most people love, right? I think it's important to remember that aspect of it, because it is a brand new track for the sport. It did bring a shit ton of new people into the sport. Due to Drive to Survive, the three of us were brought in to F1. I think moving forward, like Chandler said earlier, we don't have a right to gatekeep this sport. We have a right to spread this sport. That's what we're aiming to do here at Figuring Out the Formula. I think spreading the sport, seeing people excited about certain drivers, unless they're Mercedes, seeing people excited about the experiences they could get at tracks, I think that's where the magic really happens. So with that in mind, Chandler, what was your grade for the Las Vegas Grand Prix?
Well, you see, I had an original grade in my mind, and then you just went and gave such a motivational speech. I'm inclined to. So, to be honest with you, my original rationale was that I was going to give it a C plus, because in the grand scheme of things, since we've seen this or announced this has been a thing. The big talking point and the big driving home point of this was that we were going to get to see Formula One cars race on the Vegas Strip. That delivered in the race. Obviously, we had some safety cars and slow starts and stuff, but at the tail end of the race, we had 25 laps of just pure high speed down the strip, and that's what we're going for. Now, how we got there needs a lot of work, needs a lot of improvement. But so, if it was like, hey, check mark, we got the Vegas Strip, it was all right. It was what we expected. That's a C. The Vegas Strip race, love it. It might be the longest straight on the calendar. I'm not sure if it is or not, but it seems like it is. But it's fantastic. It hit the marks of everything they've been advertising and wanting for. Let's clean up how we got there in terms of the practice sessions, the logistical stuff. I mean, the side stuff. We didn't even talk about it that much. I did see a tweet where like the Las Vegas, because the casino, one of the casinos, I didn't even say which one, was so scared because FIA and Formula One had been threatening to pull their licenses to show it and like have advertisements if they didn't pay up or if they like didn't do all their measures to keep people who didn't pay tickets from watching it. The casinos were scared to death. I saw that Las Vegas police was dispatched because 20 people like posted up in a parking garage at one of the things and was like looking out of the parking garage watching, and they like went to arrest all 20 people. So let's clean that stuff up. It ain't got to be, again, you ain't got to gatekeep it, like, but we got some stuff to work on. But at the end of the day, I've sent, after I watched the race, to our group text message, the meme of like when Shaq was like, I owe you an apology. I wasn't familiar with your game. That's how I felt, because I had no expectations or low expectations for this. But I'm telling you, just to see those cars going down the strip, it kind of makes me want to go just to see those, get something on the strip and watch those cars haul tail right down it.
Yeah. I mean, something quick to add so we don't, just take forever on this. I want to give the biggest fucking gold star to whoever was flying the camera helicopter this weekend, because the shots they were getting of all the Vegas hotels without all like a bunch of the crazy lights out front and just watching the cars go down the strip was one of the coolest fucking things I've ever seen in my fucking life, bro. Like I mean, I would go to this race just to see that alone.
And shout out to the Sphere. The Sphere was a big winner this one too.
So
that was clutch.
You mentioned that, Chandler. My thing is, the FIA said that the Sphere would not have any blue, yellow, or red in it. There was at one moment in the race, I saw a picture. It was a Google Chrome ad,
which is awesome.
For those who are not familiar, that's fucking red, blue, and yellow.
I think what they ended up saying about that was that like you couldn't have any ads that were like that, because I think that they reserved it for red flags or yellow flags, like they actually showed on the Sphere, which is pretty cool. And then the fucking emoji face dude with the helmet on, that was pretty sick.
Yeah,
that was
fire.
Pretty sick.
The thing is, most of the drivers were saying that they couldn't even see the Sphere because it was so far off in the distance. They're, at that moment, it's a quick left hand, then a quick right hand turn. Well, they're already looking to the right by the time they get to the left. So
I was gonna say, it's like not for them. It's for us.
It's just exactly. But that was the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So it was a B- from me, B- from Pat, and a C+ from Chandler, with room for improvement, right? Like there are simple things that they can do that will make this an A-, A+ race even. It's there for 9 more years. So make the changes, make it less of a show, a pageant, more of a Formula One race, and then you'll see it explode. Moving to the predictions. So last episode, we predicted who would finish highest after Max Verstappen. Once again, Max Verstappen won the race, so it's a good rule to have, right? This was a close one between two of us. Let's knock out the weakest link. That was Chandler. Chandler, you picked Lando Norris, who crashed on lap 3. Tough shit. It is what it is. That sucks.
Yeah, I've been talking about Fernando. Man, talk about Fernando torpedo. Looked like me at the craps table. That looked like me at the roulette wheel. Just one quick spin and I'm done.
Yep. You hate to see it, but not me and Pat. Me and Pat, I've been talking a lot of shit. And rightfully so. I've won the last 3 predictions. I thought it was going to be 4 because I picked Checo. Pat, you picked Charles Leclerc. Normally, when you pick a Ferrari, you just know they're going to end up in 8th place or retired. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case this week. So, Pat, you get to pick first for the... What are you smoking on that, Pat?
I am smoking that Jones pack right now, baby.
Okay, well...
I'm smoking that shit all night.
All right, before
I get into my pick, I just want to note what the two of you said on the last podcast. Chandler, it is so good to know that I can pick like 5 drivers and know I'm going to beat Pat. And then Kyle says, you could pick 19 and beat Pat. Guess what the fuck happened? I know ball. I
Okay,
know
well,
ball. I
right.
knew they were at the bottom of the barrel. There had to be luck in there somewhere.
Okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. This is the last prediction of the season because this is the last race of the season. So the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is going to take the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is going to take place on Sunday, 11/26 at 8 a.m. So this Sunday at 8 a.m. is the race. Saturday is the qualifying at 9 a.m. Some decent times again. Love that. Pat, you are going to pick first for the last prediction, then me, then Chandler. Next episode, we will release the score since we started doing these predictions. So the winner is going to get a prize. What should the prize be, boys? A bottle of liquor or something?
For like the whole season or a bottle of liquor every race?
No, whoa.
We're talking
yo.
about for like the end of the season result.
That's yeah. Okay. The end of the season, I'm fine with that.
None of us have done the math.
We don't
yet
know.
before.
I have a feeling it's not me.
It's not Chandler. I think I struggled a little bit at the beginning, so we'll see. It might be Pat, but the winner of the prediction race is going to be rewarded with a fifth of whatever their liquor of their choosing is. So Pat, bring us to our final prediction of the year. So for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, who are you taking?
I am going to take Lando Norris. I think it's time for him to bounce back, lock up the place in the Constructors' Championship for McLaren, and just bring it home. And Aston Martin's not going to fucking catch them.
Well, I really wanted to pick Lando, but I'm going to. Damn, do I? I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri.
Okay.
You know, I do jinx McLaren when I pick them, but maybe this is it, boys. I think they're going to suit this track, and I think I'm going to end up getting a free bottle of liquor. So, Pat, you picked Lando. I picked Oscar. Chandler, who are you going with?
I'm going to go with the horse for course who races well here, Mr. Charles Leclerc. He races decent here, so we're going to take him and hope I can make a little ripple in the pond.
Well, we'll see. We'll keep you guys updated. Listen next episode to see who actually ends up with the free bottle of liquor, because it's probably between me and Pat. Chandler's probably out of it already. We haven't done the math, but we'll see. That is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix coming up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, just let us know at Figuring Out the Formula. We appreciate it, and go Dogs.